Okay.
Okay. Hi, Robert.
Hi, good evening, Virag.
We almost made a live streaming, huh? Almost.
Almost.
But
almost is not good enough.
That's very true. But, I always say Israel is such a high-tech country. The only people I'm always having trouble with connecting is Israelis. The Wi-Fi doesn't work. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me and joining us. So we're gonna be short and to the point. I want it to be really a digestible short session with you, but also offering some added value. And I think the primary audience is going to be Americans, but also, Europeans and Israelis are involved in this community. So I shared with you behind the screen that even just to do this event with you, I got so many backlashes that it makes me question whether we totally lost the ability to really talk about sensitive issues and discuss nuances. And I know it's a rhetorical question, but the fact that there is this situation going on and we cannot even talk about it unless you take one side, I think that's a problem in and of itself. Do you feel the same way, that we absolutely are just, need to take sides, otherwise we are getting backlashes?
Look, I think that as a private person, of course, I have my own opinions about this issue, and I can understand the moral implications of this war, and I can differentiate between the aggressor and the victim. This is at one hand. At the other hand, I'm an analyst. Okay, I deal with national security issues. And as an analyst, I don't mix professional considerations with moral considerations. I don't deal with moral analysis. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I try to erect a firewall between these two issues.
I think most people, sometimes including me, when I'm driven by emotions, it's really hard to do that. But in a way, it's also a problematic, like it offers even or generates even more problems, because, and this leads me to the main question here, is that it seems to be that so many people assume that Putin just woke up last week and created a war. But we know that it didn't happen like that. It's obviously not the case. So in your opinion, and if you could just sum it up, what caused this war now? What helped the eruption?
Okay, I think for the beginning, I don't think that we are doing a good service to the Ukrainians by assuming that the other side is irrational, that they are crazy, they didn't plan it, it was done on the spot decision, and all this kind of nonsense that you are saying in the mainstream media. And one day I looked at Fox News, and I have seen a general there, and he was completely clueless. He couldn't understand it. The only explanation he could bring up was just like Putin went crazy and he's irrational and all kind of things. Now, if you're a professional and you cannot bring another kind of explanation to this problem, then that the other kind is crazy, that you are not a professional, with all due respect. So if now I'm trying to answer your question, this was only the firing shot. So I think that in the big picture, there is one single most important question of geopolitics. And the most important question is which two of the three main superpowers band up and go against the one that is left alone. Mm-hmm. Okay. And these are the big stones of the big components of the geopolitical map. Okay, the movement between these three superpowers, and we can feel the tectonic plates shifting, and this creates friction, and it breaks the smaller stones between these tectonic plates. And one of these stones is Ukraine, as the balance of power changes between the United States and the two autocratic powers. There are a lot of splinters that fly over and hit the small countries. One of the small countries is Ukraine. The other small country is Taiwan, of course. And the third is Iran and Israel and the Middle East. So this is the big picture.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so still, like, if I want to explain to an American who really just believed that Putin went crazy, what am I telling them? Like, what's the one sentence, at least a reason to take
Okay.
for this war?
Okay. So perhaps he went crazy, but there is a method to this craziness. And what is the method? Um, at the height of the Cold War, the Soviet Union, now Russia, reached the peak of its extension. And it extended from how Kamala Harris said it's a big country. It is not, etc. I don't want to repeat the things that she said, but it was a really big country, and it stretched from Germany at one hand to Japan at the other hand. It's a huge country, and they felt very, very safe in this huge space. Okay, now the Soviet Union collapsed, and this huge country shrank into a much smaller dimensions, into much more smaller dimension. And with this loss of territory, they have lost a lot of a sense of security. Mm-hmm. And we have seen President Putin trying to rectify, to correct this situation for 10 years now. And we can see war after war, we can see him extending the borders of the Soviet Union of Russia today to more defensible borders.
So wait, do you really say that what I think you're saying, that you believe also that Putin is here to restore the Soviet Union? So basically next can be Hungary and, all the former Soviet Union countries, or like, is it something you can foresee?
I think that when he looks in the mirror, he sees less Joseph Stalin. He sees Peter the Great, or one of the great Tsars of Russia. And this is the greatness that he wants to restore, not the communist Russia. And the methods used by him are not necessarily conquest. I think that he will be perfectly content with controlling the foreign policy and the security policy of these countries, not necessarily conquering them.
So how do you foresee that? I read your article in Hungarian where you mentioned, and I'm cheating here because I didn't know the gentleman name you were referring to, the Karl von Clausewitz, and you said that that Putin is kind of like repeating that philosophy. So can you explain what that really means?
Yes, basically, people try to second guess his war plan. Okay, and they were quick to point out that Putin's war plan failed because it was a blitzkrieg and it failed. Now, I don't know where this assumption comes from. Okay, mm-hmm. I have seen the troop movements, and there was nothing in it to suggest that they try to repeat a kind of 1991 Allied thrust inside the Iraq or 1967 Israeli attack against the Arab states, and nothing like this. It was a very slow and very methodological battle in 3 steps, and these 3 steps are the steps suggested by the guy Clausewitz that you have talked about. And the first aim is trying to persuade, to convince the leadership of the other side to capitulate. And mm-hmm. It can be done by psychological means or by physical means. Mm-hmm. By physical means, I mean a decapitating attack, killing them, okay, mm-hmm. or capturing them. And by persuasion, I mean military operations that suggest that all opposition is fruitless, is mm-hmm. futile. So there is no point in resisting the Russian army. This was the first phase, and we have seen very little kinetic operations and very much psychological operations. Everything was done in order to achieve this psychological effect under Ukrainian leadership. Mm-hmm. And now we know that it failed. Mm-hmm. Now, the second target is the Ukrainian armed forces. Okay, in the first phase, Putin tried to co-opt these armed forces, try telling them that he respects them, that they should mutiny against the Ukrainian government, but it didn't work. And now he started to grind them down. And we can see the operational tempo increasing. We can see much more kinetic operations and much less psychological operations. This is the second phase.
Okay.
And if this second phase will prove unsuccessful, then we'll see the third phase, when the target will be Ukraine's civilian population. And we will see terror bombings and
aren't that happening already? I mean, that's what the news say, but honestly, you know, there was this Holocaust Memorial that was set to be the target, and then apparently it's not the target and it's still inactive. So, you know, you really can't trust anything you see, and it just makes it even more confusing. And, you know, I was thinking this is the first real war in terms of like conquering another country that plays out in front of us on social media. So it's like really, you know, not including like the Middle Eastern things, because that never gotten this kind of attention, obviously, from the international audience, and that's a problem in and of itself. But based on what you are saying, is like, should I, as a Hungarian and Eastern European, be concerned that my country can be also, you know, a target based on all these things you say?
If we follow the logic of Putin's geopolitical thinking, then it's obvious that he won't stop at Ukraine, and he will do everything to extend his influence into Central Europe. Because in order for Russia to have defensive borders, they have to control the entry points into this vast area. Exactly. It basically, we can see entry areas. And today, Russia has to defend a border of several thousand kilometers wide, from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. And the European continent is a kind of funnel, and he has to push the border to the west and to stop at the Carpathian Mountains and several other locations in Europe in order to have defensible borders. This is his logic.
Okay, that doesn't make me calmer right now. On the other hand, like I want to understand, and I want people to understand, or at least, you know, think, why now? Like, what happened now? What triggered? And my personal opinion is that the United States has a lot to do with the eruption of the situation. Again, when we talk about it, you become a bad guy. And I really want to emphasize this, because from my studies regarding the Shoah and, you know, the Holocaust and everything, I feel like we always give an excuse to the West. We always give an excuse to the US, because it's always justified what they are doing. Saying this, you know, as someone who is actually living in the US and the free world. But if we are thinking about history, America was responsible for the Holocaust the same way any Eastern European country was, and yet that's never a topic. And here also, I feel like everyone just went blatantly hateful towards Russians, not only Putin, but Russians as you know, a nation at large, whereas we forget to mention the American responsibility of why this situation broke out now. You can disagree with me fully.
Okay, I don't think that the United States can be blamed for the Holocaust. Perhaps they didn't help as much as they could have helped, but that's for sure. But I don't think that they bear a direct responsibility for the Holocaust. Now, as about the United States responsibility, I can point to two main issues. The other side is a kind of spring, and President Putin used this metaphor that you can take a spring and you can compress it, but at some point you will get some kind of reaction. Okay, and I don't know. I'm not sure that the Russians, the ideal end state for the Russians was to join the Pax Americana, the American global system, and to live under the American boot. Okay. To live according to the American global order. I don't think that the Russians would have ever accepted it, just like the Chinese. They wouldn't have accepted it. But this is at one hand. At the other hand, I think that we in the West, we did everything we could to alienate the Russians at one hand. And the other hand, we failed to prepare ourselves for the inevitable reaction of this Russia, which got angrier and angrier with each year passing. So it was a multiple failure.
Do you think there is any justification for Russia to be angry? Not the war, but the fact that Putin felt that he is being, pressured all the time. Like people talk about, how Russian minorities were treated in the Ukraine, and so that it had some predecessing actions and affairs. So Putin felt like, okay, enough of stepping on my feet.
Just think about having the shoe on the other foot. Okay, as Alan Dershowitz used to say always, what if the shoe was on the other foot? Just imagine the Russians putting missiles or Russian bases in the United States vicinity, in Cuba, just like the Cuban Missile Crisis. How did the United States react to this? The big powers don't like to be poked around in their backyard. Okay. The big powers, they have their own spheres of influence. Perhaps you don't like this concept, but it exists. Okay, it exists, and I know that the Americans got very, very touchy when some foreign power enters the Western Hemisphere, the Monroe Doctrine, So it's the same for the Russians. They have their own Monroe Doctrine, and they don't like foreigners in their own backyard. And you can tell them till tomorrow that you are only bringing democracy and liberalism and Western values. They don't give a flying fig, because what they see a threat.
Right.
They see a threat.
Absolutely. And I agree with you on that. And so if we, like not being diplomats and big head of states see that, I can't understand, unless it's on purpose, obviously, that the people who are calling the shots don't understand psychology, and they should understand where Putin is coming from in his mind, exactly what you said. And I think it's a problem how America always feels that they have the moral right to impose their views on someone else. And, when I was studying international relations, and we had this concept that I think Bush came up with it first, the preemptive war, I was like, how anyone has the moral right to, under the notion of preemptive, impose something on another person or another country. I feel like now Putin kind of went into this, like he is preemptively doing something just because he wanted to avoid that the other power is actually stepping on its feet even more. I don't know if that makes sense, but you make me think, and I'm like, that just makes it even more confusing. To be respectful of your time, I have two short questions more, and I'm going to bring in Israel here.
Okay.
And, Zelensky has been the hero now. All you can see is his face all over. Justly, he is a hero, even though if you ask me, Israel's prime minister or any Eastern European prime minister would follow suit should the worst happen, So I think he's doing the morally right thing. This being said, I'm not questioning that. However, yesterday I saw an article in which he's calling out Israel for Israel's lack of help, actually, so that Israel is not really taking side with the Ukrainian people. And I think that's a problem, because Zelensky knows very well what would happen if Israel moves. And he knows that, and everyone knows that. And I feel like he is guilt pressuring Israel into something that would just create even more of a problem. And here in brackets also, the fact that he's Jewish, it's being used, and I think it's being misused. The fact that he's Jewish should absolutely not matter in this war. And yet he is calling out the Jewish community for even more help and things. So I feel like, especially with Israel's delicacy on the international sphere and how Israel is being attacked every day, this is a very reckless call from Zelensky. And I don't know what you think about it. What can Israel do without, causing a third world war the next moment?
Okay, so first and foremost, I don't think that Israel as a Jewish state has to stay on higher moral ground like any other. We don't want to be anything special. I don't want that the burden of the Holocaust to pressure me, to sit on my shoulders. Let it sit on the shoulder of the murderers, not on the shoulder of the victims. Okay, so it doesn't oblige me for doing anything. That's my point of departure. Now, as we know, the foreign policy is always based on interests at one hand and values at the other hand. Mm-hmm. And we have a very delicate situation in Israel because of two reasons. In Israel, we have two large communities of Russian-born Jews and Ukrainian-born Jews. Okay, so this is one problem. The other problem is the Russian presence in the Middle East. President Obama ran away, and he simply gave away the Middle East to the Russians, Syria to the Russians. And he created a situation in which we can defend ourselves against Iranian expansionism in Syria only if the Russians permit it. Now we cannot, out of self-defense, we cannot antagonize the Russians in Syria. We cannot pick a fight with the Russians. I would like to remind everybody that during the Cold War, we had a 6-year shadow war with the Russians. From 1967 to 1973, a very nasty war with the Russians here in the Middle East, dogfights and missile attacks and commando raids on each other. And they didn't enjoy it very much, but we didn't enjoy it either, because it carried with it the risk of getting involved in a war with a superpower. Mm-hmm. Okay, and we don't want to repeat this scenario again. Okay, and with all due respect to Ukraine, we have accepted refugees, we gave away humanitarian aid, but we are not ready to take sides with operational equipment or troops in this issue. It's not our war, with all due respect. We cannot send troops to every hotspot in the world.
I totally agree with you also, like from an objective point of view. And, Hungary is being told the same. Why we are not sending help, why we are not, especially the left in Hungary is really pushing for that. And I'm like, how can you not see the moment we move, we escalate the situation even more? And that's my problem when here in America, people tell us, oh, the Europeans are so chickens and, they're chickening out to help and things. I'm getting actually really triggered by this, because from here in the US, from your ivory tower in the Upper West Side, you're going to tell me that my country needs to go into a war, which is not our war, as you said. So I think also Hungary and the surrounding countries do what's morally right. You help the refugees, you help the way you can. And it's very conflicting for me to see and hear that, that unless we help, we are just like the bad people on the spectrum. So the last question is this just the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning, what we are seeing? Like, what shall we prepare for?
Obviously, it's only the beginning. And I believe that the correct response to this situation is not to pick a fight now with Russia when NATO is not ready. NATO is obviously not ready. The US presidents, from President Bush, Obama for sure, President Trump for sure, told endless times that the Europeans that they have to get their act together, and they didn't do anything. And now the pacifist of yesterday has become the jingoist of today, and they are itching for a fight with Russia. And I think it's a very, very, very poor idea, because they are very unprepared. The European population is very unprepared, and the European armies are very much unprepared. And I don't think that the United States, and rightly so, the United States is not eager to get into another war in the Eurasian continent. So I think that the best solution now is a peace based on a compromise between Russia and Ukraine, and this peace will reflect the lack of balance of forces, of power between these two sides. Obviously, there is a strong side and a weak side, and we have to recognize it.
I appreciate that answer, and I really hope we can get there. And here I have another problem with Zelensky, because he said, and for me it felt really cocky how he said it in an interview, that he's okay to sit down with Putin, or like, actually he didn't say that. He said, Putin, sit down with me, but not like, on a faraway table like you do with Macron and the others. This is troubling to me. This is like, sounds like a provocation. There is a fine line between a pride, chutzpah, and being very reckless again, because at this moment you don't care how you sit down at the table. You just want to sit at the table, and if it's 30 meters from each other, it's 30 meters from each other. So I feel like these things should be way carefully weighed in, and people should call Zelensky out for this kind of sentences, which I think is not looking for a solution, but a little bit like, okay, I don't know how to say it in a nice word without hurting him, but it's cocky and it's not productive from my reading,
Yes, I agree with you. And I think that there is a very dangerous dialogue between the public opinion and the Ukrainian leadership. Because in this dialogue, the Ukrainian leadership is telling the world public opinion, we are strong, we will resist, we will fight to the last person. And the public opinion claps hands and tell them, fine, good, you are great. And we can see the Russians advancing all the time and very huge human sufferings in Ukraine, and it's futile. It's futile. It's futile because nobody will come to help you. And even if the sanctions will cut, they will be felt strongly in Russia in another 3 months where the Russians will be on the Polish border. So what's the point? What's the point in it?
Right.
I think that the Ukrainians and the world powers should seek a compromise solution to this problem, to end the fighting as soon as possible, because there is always a chance of escalation and the extension of the fighting toward the Baltic states or toward Poland, and we don't know where it will stop. Exactly. It got out of hand, and I think that the U.S. leadership, who should manage this, the White House should manage this problem. They are not managing this problem.
Right. And I think that's giving a really nice wrap up to our talk. I really thank you for your time and for your thoughts here. And thank you for everyone who is rewatching this video. And regardless whether you disagree with our talk or not, just know that this talk is not here to justify war. And we wish nothing but, strength to everyone who is personally affected day after day from this war. And with this, I wish a peaceful Shabbat to everyone. Thank you. Toda rabá.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Thanks. Shabbat shalom.